You are listening to Why I Vaccinate, and our guest now is Dr. Emily Martin. Dr. Martin is Associate Professor of Epidemiology with the University of Michigan School of Public Health. Welcome to the show, Dr. Martin.
Thank you for having me.
What's an epidemiologist? What exactly do you do?
Well, I have to say, this is the era where people know what epidemiologists do. No one ever knew what I did before. But what we do is measure disease. We watch for patterns, we watch for changes, we look for unusual things to happen, but we also spend a lot of time characterizing what makes people sick and what kind of actions they can take to make themselves healthier.
You guys are kind of like rock stars right now because everybody's talking about disease and infection with COVID. But there's another important disease infection that's taking place at this time of year. And Veronica McNally is going to take it from here and talk about the flu with you.
Doctor, thank you for joining us to talk about the flu. I think it'd be helpful to start out and make sure that parents understand what we mean when we say the flu. Sometimes I think people think it's a stomach flu, and you don't think it's just the stomach flu, right?
Right. There's, a lot of people use the word flu to mean the stomach flu. Sometimes people use the word flu to mean all sorts of cold and flu symptoms. We know that there are 20 or more viruses that can cause respiratory symptoms, but the one that we're going to talk about today is influenza, which is a certain type of virus that we have a very specific vaccine for.
And right now is the time that people should be getting that vaccine for influenza. And what do you want people to know about this vaccine? What can they expect to happen when they get the vaccine?
Absolutely. So you're right that now is the time to vaccinate, particularly for kids. So what parents of children can expect to happen if you have a younger kid, especially if it's their first time being vaccinated for flu, they might need 2 shots at the recommendation of your pediatrician. So it takes some time. So now October is really what we focus on for vaccine month for that reason. Once you get the vaccine, the side effects are very similar to other vaccines, maybe a little bit of arm soreness, maybe a little bit of fatigue in kids, maybe a little bit of crankiness, and that'll resolve very quickly. And then you kind of go into the rest of the flu season with your full protection 2 weeks after receiving the vaccine.
And we haven't heard a lot about flu cases yet. Should that in any way factor into the decision to get a vaccine or not right now?
So you're right that we haven't had flu cases yet this season. In fact, we had almost no flu cases last season. So this tells us 2 things. First of all, now is the time to get vaccinated because you want to get vaccinated and give your body the time to build that protection before flu gets here. So now is a good time to do this. Don't wait until cases start. The other thing that it tells us, though, is in a typical flu season, our body has the opportunity to get introduced to the virus and maybe build some levels of immunity in our own systems. And that didn't happen last year because we didn't have any flu around. So experts are concerned that we might have a particularly fierce flu season this year. So that makes vaccination now during the month of October even more important.
And what does it mean, fierce flu season? So if someone is infected with influenza, are the symptoms mild or can the symptoms be really severe and even fatal?
So we're concerned that rates will be higher than we normally would have in a regular year. That's the big worry. But then you're right, among those people that do get infected, some of them can become very sick. Just speaking just specifically about the kid data, we see thousands of kids end up in the hospital in a normal year for influenza. Sometimes more than 25,000 kids in the US will end up hospitalized. In our worst years, we've even had hundreds of kids, unfortunately, die from the flu. So this is a disease that can be very serious, particularly in the younger and the older individuals.
What do you tell a parent who says, I just don't feel comfortable about vaccinating against flu? I vaccinate my kids for all the other infectious diseases they can come in contact with, but I just won't do it for the flu vaccine.
I always encourage people to make decisions in partnership with their pediatrician. Your pediatrician is going to be one of your best resources for knowing your child and for information. But what also gives me a lot of confidence in the flu vaccine is the fact that we've been using the flu vaccine since the 1940s in the United States, and we've been using the flu vaccine in kids for decades. So we have an incredible amount of experience in how to dose the vaccine and how to use the vaccine well, and we've been able to see the data on how well it works in terms of reducing illnesses in kids by 50%, 60% or more in many years.
And one of the things I think parents are hearing about is this phrase quadrivalent. Can you talk about what that means as it relates to the vaccine?
Absolutely. So the flu vaccine has the challenge of covering a virus that shifts and changes every year, and we don't always know what the shifts and changes are going to be until they actually happen. I guess if you could kind of the side of my office where you can quite where I am now. We've actually got a poll where we try to guess what's going to happen based on what we're seeing around the world for the viruses. And the reason I bring that up is because there's that level of uncertainty about which specific flu virus is going to be around. We try to put multiple flu viruses in the vaccine so that we cover all of our bases. And so we put 2 A viruses and 2 B viruses in there so that we're covered no matter which of those 4 pop up in our communities.
And Anne is a grandmother to a baby, and I know that she has some questions for you. So I'm going to have Anne talk to you too.
So, can teeny tiny newborn infants get a flu vaccine, Dr. Martin?
So we start vaccinated infants at 6 months of age. And one of the reasons that we have that age cutoff is because infants receive antibodies from their mothers. And so we want to make sure that the infants are ready to make their own antibodies independently, and that starts at about 6 months. So one of the things that we do to protect the smallest infants is promote vaccination of pregnant women. So vaccination in pregnancy, we know is safe, and we know that it works well, and that goes a long way to provide further protection to the infant once the baby is born.
And what other tips do you have other than getting the vaccine, on top of getting the vaccine, to help prevent the flu for all of us?
So I think we've learned a lot over the last year about things that prevent the flu because we didn't have any flu last year. And so some of the things that we've learned, we can carry forward. So stay home when you're sick. Limit your interaction with the vulnerable people in your life when you've got symptoms, because it could be the flu and you don't want to infect somebody else. And if you've got situations where you need to go out and you're symptomatic, we've also learned a lot about how well masking works to prevent transmission. And so we can take some of these lessons forward in flu season, just like we do with COVID.
Dr. Emily Martin, Associate Professor of Epidemiology with the University of Michigan School of Public Health. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for the great advice, the great help with regard to the flu. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And you've been listening to Why I Vaccinate, presented by the Franny Strong Foundation and the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. On behalf of my co-host, Veronica McNally, I'm Ann Thomas, and we hope you have a great day.